Lies told often enough become society's physics. The truth, when it erupts, is feared as a highly infectious madness. Projection. The words of Stefan Molyneux, who's been banned from a number of social media platforms for speaking that scary little madness that is actually an explosion of the truth. We're going to try to follow suit here, not just today, but every day moving forward. The opinions expressed by the Reverend are his own and no one else's on the planet. Not friends, not foes, not supporters, not detractors, not sponsors, and certainly not employers. They have been adjudicated thought crime in all jurisdictions. Consider yourself warned. They're coming from the heart. They are guided by the mind. They are guaranteed to choke you with the truth cock. Welcome, boys and girls. It's time once again for the Sunday sermon. Back in Spokane, 2 weeks out. Everybody in for the drum roll. Let's get some fire in here. All right. Little Red Desert to kick it off as usual, man. It's been rough being out of circulation for the past 2 weeks. I appreciate y'all's patience. A couple of weeks ago, I had to work on a Sunday down at the chemical plant in Houston. And last week, I was on the road doing my level best to get here to Spokane. So I'm back. You guys can see all the posters in the background. All this stuff here. The AK-47 and the 45 are the work of one Don Rock of the world-famous Terror Worldwide. Any of you guys that have been around the scene since the old school days will know who the fuck Don is. I've got a ton of his artwork around here, not just in the second level of the war room, but upstairs in the living room as well. And, of course, that campaign sign that we took out of somebody's yard, me and Johnny Von Bodman years ago, the rich get richer, the poor just die. That was just sitting in somebody's yard during election season. So we kind of took that and ran with it, and it's become a fixture around here. So we keep that on the wall. But anyway, yeah, I'm back, folks. I am back in Spokane, Washington. We are on the second level of the Bart Bunker, and we're coming at you live with another Sunday sermon. I want to thank all the guys that came out to see me on the way out. Brother James Pearson. And by the way, shout out to all the guys that are down at Coach Tony Blauer's combative camp, Spear System combative camp, getting their PDR cert this week. And sorry I couldn't be there, guys. I really hate like hell that I had to miss it. You know, because you got James down there, you got Big John, you got, you got a lot of my friends down there. But unfortunately this year I just couldn't pull it off. But anyway, James Pearson came out to see me on the way out, and his lovely wife, Nelda, who I understand is a big fan and supporter of the sermon. Good to see you. Thank you very much for the culinary gifts straight out of the garden. Some amazing salsa, some kicking peppers, and life is good. So thank you for that. Also, Brother Sonny Puzikis, who I got to see at the Fresh Market in Frisco on the way out. First friendly face I saw coming back to Texas, last friendly face I saw on the way out. Always good to see kindred spirits and like minds. And speaking of which, we got a few of those on board here today. We got, G-Dub showed up. We got Emmy. We got Carrie and Roman from Opium Tales. Let me see who else. Kevin Rogers. I know I'm missing a bunch of people here. I'm trying to keep track. Everything's just sort of like scrolling. And I've got two windows open, by the way, because apparently some of the comments that people are making on Facebook are not showing up in the StreamYard window, which is kind of a drag. Very sorry to see that. So if I miss anybody's comments, man, I really apologize. We got Brother Ryan. We got we got Gita. We got Brother Jude, who apparently is on Facebook, but apparently not showing up on the StreamYard window. So again, if I miss anything, my apologies in advance. But yeah, we're here. I'm going to go ahead and fade the bumper music out. The bumper music, as always, little band called Red Desert from the smoldering ruins of Minneapolis, Minnesota. The name of the track is Older, No Wiser. Feel like it's perfectly appropriate because every week I get a little bit older, and every week you guys get to decide if I am any wiser. Some weeks I do a little bit better than others. We got a lot of stuff to get into today, man. Things that I wanted to cover over the course of the past 2 weeks, but again, just being on the road and stuff like that, it was a little problematic. But we're back. Back home in Spokane. Got through orientation on the new gig up here. Again, not going to mention the specific employer because of dox culture and all kinds of other stuff. I don't want people, running behind playing tattletale and going, you got a fucking alt-right and hardcore extremist bullshit. I don't need any of that shit. But anyway, got through orientation. Everything is cool. I think I'm really going to like working at this company. There's going to be travel, but it's all going to be in the Northwest. And so I'm home for the foreseeable future, and it feels really, really good. A year and a half on the road took its toll in a whole lot of ways, but it taught me a lot, and it's been a great adventure. And I appreciate all of you guys that have been along for the entire ride, offering your support and everything else. So let me get a couple of sponsor shout outs out of the way real quick. Of course, first and foremost, we've got to go with Roman and Allie and Roxy and the bevy of beautiful women over at opiumtales.com. They are the erotic pinups and portraits people. Roman is one of my oldest and dearest friends. You can check them out on opiumtales.com. And check out some of that badass artwork and some of that testosterone-driven commentary, because I'm all about that. And also, last but certainly not least, Nordic Smoke Barbecue, the only legit barbecue in the inland Northwest. Casey and Dusty Tellison, they're going to be out again next week, which is really, really good. And I'm going to suggest for all my Washington people, to specifically my guys here in the Spoke, to go out and support them. Also, next weekend, the 31st, Casey, who, as you know, and I've pointed out before, has a book coming out. It's going to be kind of like a launch party. It's going to be right down there in Spangle, Washington. You can find all the details on my page or on the Nordic Smoke page. But he's going to be reading excerpts from his book, Freaks of a Feather, which is being published by Latop Press out of right here in Spokane. I'm not sure if it's still going on, but there for a minute, Amazon had the Kindle edition on special for $1. So if you want to grab that Kindle edition, if you're one of those Kindle folks, and I happen to be, but I'm also, going to get an actual copy and everything, but they're having the big launch party. Casey is a combat vet, Marine combat vet, and he's got this book that's come out, Freaks of a Feather, which is it's a collection of anecdotes and musings and things like that from his time overseas. And the guy's a phenomenal writer. He's exceedingly gifted. So anyway, that's going to be next weekend. The 31st is going to be down in Spangle. Check either the Nordic Smoke page or my page for the details on that. And now that it's going to be official, probably starting next week, we're going to start reading some excerpts here during the sermon. And I'm going to have the privilege of sharing Casey's gift as a writer with all of you guys. So check it out. Definitely. Again, the name of the book is Freaks of a Feather. It's being published by Latop Press out of Spokane, Washington. Casey Tellison, one of the two Tellison brothers, my Viking brothers from Nordic Smoke Barbecue. So check that out. Before we get into the heaviest stuff, let's go ahead and knock out this particular element that's always popular, Ryan's Rabbit Hole. Let's continue. Yes. Yes, indeed. The Ryan's Rabbit Hole segment this week, we're going to pay homage to a guy, a particular scientist, Michio Kaku, who he's kind of a guy. He's the kind of a scientist that everybody can get behind. Yes, he does some high-end stuff, and yes, he's been featured in a couple of documentaries where he has expressed some opinions on global warming and climate change that I don't necessarily agree with. Having said that, The man's academic bona fides are beyond reproach, and he's done some very critical and very accessible work in the areas of theoretical and quantum physics. He is the kind of guy that can appear one day right alongside Neil deGrasse Tyson or any of the other pop scientists, and then the next day be on the George Norrie, fucking George Norrie conspiracy stuff. But the guy is a fascinating unit, man, and we're gonna throw that name out there again, Michio Kaku. Michiokaku. I'm sure some of you guys are at least tangentially familiar with the guy and his work. But again, if you are looking for a scientist who can make really, really complex things like quantum physics and quantum mechanics and things like that accessible to us lesser unwashed intellects, then definitely he is worth a look. So he's going to be the rabbit hole. You get to decide how far you follow it down, but that's going to be the Ryan's Rabbit Hole segment for this week. And that's what happens when one of my bookmark tabs has an ad. So sorry about that little musical interlude, but little sip of liquid enthusiasm. Let's just jump off into this thing. First of all, want to get this out of the way. There were so many things that I wanted to discuss over the past 2 weeks, but again, work obligations 1 week and then being on the road the second week. But we've already made the observation of the new trend, and this is going to be the anchor of one of the bullet points that we're going to be touching on later on with regard to the othering of the unvaccinated population. Here's a little break. We're not going to take it back to the days of the COVID cast, but I did feel like this needed to be addressed because this is coming out of Illinois this week. Chicago 5 NBC affiliate up there. More than 150 people have died and nearly 600 have been hospitalized in Illinois due to COVID-19 in breakthrough cases after they were fully vaccinated. Now, I'm going to take some time and read this verbatim because I want to make sure that it sinks in. According to state health officials, according to data updated Wednesday by the Illinois Department of Public Health, 159 people in Illinois have died due to COVID-19 or complications after being fully vaccinated. That figure equates at least 593 fully vaccinated people have been hospitalized in Illinois. State only reports breakthrough infections among those who have been hospitalized or died. So it could have been 10 times that many infected, but they're not actually getting reported because they didn't get hospitalized and they didn't die. Again, from the article, those totals mean 8 more fully vaccinated individuals, 30 more have been hospitalized. And that's just since last week. The state does not publicize the number of residents who tested positive after being fully vaccinated. A person is considered fully vaccinated 2 weeks after receiving the second dose of either the Pfizer or Moderna COVID vaccine, or 2 weeks after receiving the single dose Johnson & Johnson vaccine. You know, Johnson & Johnson, the pudding blood vaccine that's causing all kinds of blood clots. And then, of course, you got the Moderna vaccine that's causing inflammation around the heart of the vaccinated. So what does this say? 159 dead, almost 600 hospitalized after being fully vaccinated. Now, people with 2 brain cells to rub together might think, what does that mean? Well, it means that clearly the vaccine's effectiveness is somewhat suspect. But again, it's being used as a narrative controller to push the thought that this is all the fault of the unvaccinated, rather. So you've got 600 hospitalized, 159 dead after being fully vaccinated. And whose fault is it? Well, it's our fault because we didn't take the jab that clearly didn't keep them out of the hospital. Let me just go ahead and give you the fallback defense on this because it's gotten so transparent and so predictable as to just be absurd, but I'm going to throw this out. The defense that is offered is, because first of all, okay, I don't know if you guys are old enough. I'm old enough. It's kind of covered up right here, but I still have my smallpox vaccination scar back before smallpox was allegedly eliminated back in 1972. We could get into that another time. I'm going to suggest that you read Richard Preston's book, Demon in the Freezer, if you really want to have trouble sleeping. But for the sake of the official narrative, smallpox was eliminated in 1972. So when I got the scrape, when I was a little child, I got the scrape. You know what I don't remember? I don't remember being told that even after I had the scrape, that I needed to, that I could still get smallpox, that I needed to stay 6 feet away from people to avoid giving them smallpox, even if I showed no symptoms of smallpox, and that I needed to wear a mask to continue to stop the spread of smallpox. This fallback plan of, oh, you know, you don't like vaccines, but vaccines eliminated polio, and vaccines eliminated smallpox, and vaccines eliminated this and that. You know, conceding all of that for the sake of the record, those vaccines all had one thing in common. They fucking worked. Yeah. So unless and until the efficacy and effectiveness of these vaccines can be fucking demonstrated, then I really don't want to hear that this is an equivalent thing. And I particularly don't want to hear that people who are going, you know, the other fallback is, well, they're not supposed to be 100% effective, man. They're just supposed to reduce the amount of people that die, man. They're just supposed to make it less likely for you to die. So that's why you need to get it. Oh, okay. So it's there to reduce my chance of dying, which, for the record, independent of comorbidity, stands at about, wait for it, 0.3%, even assuming I do get it. Let's go over that again. And this is the CDC's own estimates. Again, for my particular age demographic, 52, no comorbidities, no pre-existing conditions, all of these other things. I have a 99.7% chance of surviving it, even assuming I contract it, independent of the vaccine. So if your push is that it's going to cut down my chances of dying if I contract it, I think 99.7% survival is pretty good fucking odds. So pardon me if I'm not lined up to receive a jab that A, isn't effective against the vaccine, and B, has mountains of side effects, more of which keep coming out every fucking day. At the end of the day, if you choose to get the vaccine, I think you're an idiot, but go ahead. That is your choice. You have chosen to accept the narrative. You have chosen to open your body up to that jab. I'm totally okay with you putting whatever the fuck you want into your body, up to and including heroin. All right. But yeah, you don't get to make those choices for me. And unfortunately, that's exactly where it's going. But again, this is a bullet point for later in the program. There are some other things that I want to get into that I think are far more disturbing under the circumstances. And again, we're bouncing back and forth between the StreamYard window and the Facebook Live window, and I'm missing some of your comments and some of the people who are watching. So again, I apologize if I don't address everybody's comment, like specifically right when it happens, because again, I'm juggling between two and I'm not getting like all of the comments through the StreamYard window. So there's that. Right. Mike, excellent point. These shots are not vaccines in the truest sense. That's something that people are going to have to do their homework on, you know, on their own. But it's something that I'm not going to. Yeah, survival rate remains at 98%. Yep, 98% plus. Sorry for ending the. I'll forgive you the grammatical error. But yeah, ending the sentence with a preposition. But let's get on to some more disturbing things, boys and girls, because there are things more disturbing than the COVID. In fact, just about anything is more disturbing than the COVID if you're not one of the fawning faithful who has adopted the fear doctrine of the cult of Fauci. Just about any goddamn thing, you know, like the sun coming up 5 minutes too late, or, you know, a random thunderstorm or flash flood is more disturbing than COVID. But here's something that came down the pike this week that had me seriously concerned. And again, what we are coming down to is the nature of the left to offer justifications that are so transparently hypocritical as to really not even merit further comment. But again, these same leftists who have consistently, and I should point out correctly, lamented the inordinate power that corporations have over the mainstream press for years and years and years with Republicans in office. They consistently, and again, quite correctly, lamented that corporations had too much sway over the way that news was reported, that defense contractors had too much stroke with regard to coverage of the endless wars for empire that we were constantly involved in, that the press and the corporations that control it, the deep state, for lack of a better word, sort of minimized and framed coverage of things like the surveillance state in ways that justified Big Brother for all intents and purposes. They lamented Big Brother when the other side was in control. And now that they are the establishment, let's be abundantly clear on that. These people are not, quote unquote, resisting anything. Their ideology is in lockstep with every one of these major multinational corporations. Not only is their ideology in lockstep with these major corporations, but they are, good to see you, Damon. Hi. They're in lockstep with these major corporations and every other social institution. The left completely controls all social institutions, whether it's the overwhelming majority of mainstream media outlets. And of course, people will throw up, Fox, which is swayed, and of course, One American News and Newsmax. But for the most part, mainstream media is controlled by the left. Academia is exclusively controlled by the left. The Hollywood entertainment establishment is exclusively controlled by the left. And they push these ideologies. And suddenly, the left, which had lamented the power of multinational corporations before, suddenly when it comes to big tech and big tech censoring ideas with which they disagree, suddenly corporate influence over media seems to be a good thing. Wow. Odd how that works. The left would not know a principled argument if it bit them on their sanctimonious ass. We're all aware of this. If it were not for if it were not for double standards, they would have no standards at all. But over the course of the past several weeks, the Biden administration, which swore, of course, to be transparent in the same way that his previous administration in which he participated, the Obama administration, tried to carry off that they were the most transparent administration in history, while spying on journalists, while censoring things, while allowing the NSA to get up and lie about the presence and the use of the surveillance state and all these other things. Now what we have, and they have consistently defended Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and all of big tech, really. Big tech censors. The irony that I'm saying this relatively uncensored on 3 separate big tech social media platforms right now is not lost on me. The platforms are still somewhat accessible. Having said that, if you want to look at the reach of this program compared to if I was getting on here hyping a leftist political agenda, there's a thing called shadow banning, and they're perfectly aware that it exists, as much as they try to deny it. But yes, Twitter shadow bans, YouTube shadow bans, Facebook shadow bans. It's documented. This isn't even subject for debate anymore. It's a lot like, because they allow big tech to say that they don't, and the media outlets won't question that. Well, Jack Dorsey said that they don't shadow ban, so they don't. Oh, okay, right. And just last week, Tucker Carlson was spied on by the NSA, and the initial denial by the NSA was good enough for everybody on the left end of the political spectrum. Well, I mean, we asked the NSA, and the NSA said that they didn't spy on anybody. Right. Clapper, Brennan, all those guys. No, we don't ever spy on American citizens, and certainly not political enemies of the administration. That never, ever, ever happens, except for the dozens of times that it's been documented to happen. Again, there's no point in engaging with people who still deny it at this point, particularly in light of a couple of things that came out this week. And bullet point number one, which I promised we were going to get into, is the collaboration of big tech and big government to censor posts or opinions with which they disagree. The circle back bitch, Jen Psaki, the spokesperson for the Biden administration, caught herself last week saying the quiet part out loud. Yeah, she came out and flat admitted that the Biden administration, that the administration was flagging posts for Facebook, not that it was providing guidance, not that it was making suggestions, not that it was doing any of these things, but outright, the administration is flagging posts for Facebook. And again, the previously anti-corporate left is like, well, Facebook's a private company, they can do what we want. But we've crossed the Rubicon on this one, because what you have now is not a private company making its own decisions. This is a private company which has a duty to its customers and to its audience and to its following to engage in an open marketplace of ideas, leaving aside the problem with Section 230 and, we're going to have the benefits of a platform and a publisher all at one time, all of these things. Leave all of that aside right now. We are into totally new territory because the federal government has admitted that they are directly telling a private company what is and is not acceptable to publish. Now, in this particular instance, the private company in question is already of the same ideology and was already carrying the heavy weight for them without being requested. But now we're into an outright admission that the federal government is directly telling a private company what they may or may not publicize. How this doesn't scare the hell out of anyone is absolutely beyond me. Again, if it weren't for double standards, they'd have no standards at all. So let's flip the script for a moment. Let's assume that Darth Cheeto was still taking up residence in the Oval Office, and it was a Trump administration that was telling Twitter or Facebook or a major media outlet or anyone for that matter that a particular set of things, a particular ideology was something that they could not publish. Imagine a Trump administration going to Facebook and saying, hey man, you can't publish that. We are flagging that for you as misinformation. And if you go ahead and publish it anyway, after we, in our divine wisdom, have told you that it's misinformation, then there are going to be consequences and repercussions. I want you to try to get your head around the backlash that would have quite correctly, by the way, ensued. See, here's what it means to be principled. It's not okay for the government to tell citizens or businesses or publishers or writers or artists or fucking anyone what it is or is not okay to say, to publish, to print, to joke about, to broadcast. That is not okay, no matter who's in charge. And trust me, I raged against this very thing for the 8 years of the Bush junta, administration after the Patriot Act had come down. All of these things, extraordinary renditions and all of these things. And again, we're going to be getting into some more of this stuff with regard to bullet points that we've got coming up later, because again, this is one long arc and it's all connected. Psaki said the quiet part loud. They flat out admitted that they're telling social media, private companies, what it is or is not okay to impart to the rest of us great unwashed. That should be absolutely terrifying. What could make it more terrifying? Well, the fact of the other thing that Facebook started doing just this month, and some of you, we covered it, the last sermon that I did from the Southern Command Center down in Houston, we covered it. Twitter and Facebook both are asking now, if you have concerns about friends or family members becoming extremists. And I showed you a couple of screenshots, and some of you received it in your own news feed. Do you have concern? Are you concerned that someone you know is becoming an extremist, and how to report and how to seek help and all of these other things? When you have the government, which has already, the Biden administration has already promised to crack down on quote unquote right-wing domestic extremism, which is a nice way of saying anybody that disagrees with the administration. And if you doubt that those powers aren't going to be used in a purely political way, then I really can't connect with you at all. There's nothing to be said if you can't see the writing on the wall here. And again, what it means to be principled, I absolutely raged against the Patriot Act and the actions of the Alberto Gonzales Justice Department under the first the first term Bush administration. I raged against the continued growth of the surveillance state under his successor when Barack Obama was in place, and Janet Napolitano and her, if you see something, say something. This has nothing to do with public safety and everything to do with political control. I don't know how much more clear I can make it. Sad enough that we have the government flagging posts for Facebook. This is private industry working arm in arm with the federal government. Corporations, corporate power working with government power. Wow. Mussolini coined a word for that. Starts with an F. Somebody help me out here. And I'm really loath to use that term fascism because it's so played out. And on a realistic political spectrum, it's got a lot more in common with corporate communism as being practiced by the Chinese CCP than it does with, say, a Mussolini or Hitler era fascism. But it is corporate power working with government power, and that should terrify the fuck out of anyone. And up until they assumed the mantle of the Oval Office, it used to scare the hell out of the left. But again, these are not principled people. They are totally okay with whatever happens so long as they're the ones running it. They don't have a problem with violence. They don't have a problem with the surveillance state. They don't have a problem with corporate power working with government power. They don't have a problem with censorship. They don't have a problem with political application of federal law enforcement so long as they're the ones in control. Back in the days of COINTELPRO, again, quite correctly, they would have raged against that. The excesses of the FBI singling out enemies of the state that happen to be on the left, they quite correctly raged against that. Now that the enemies are their enemies, they don't care that the same FBI is doing the things that they're doing. Like, for instance, the plot, and I'm going to touch on this very, very briefly. And I said it back when the story broke, the so-called attempt that a right-wing extremist militia group in Michigan had for kidnapping Governor Gretchen Whitmer. And, again, all of my liberal friends got all aflutter. Oh, my God, see, I told you, the right-wing extremist. And I called it because I normally do, that this is all going to come out just like the Hutari militia, where all the charges were dismissed, that it's eventually, and probably not that far down the road, going to come out that this was a plot that was completely orchestrated by the FBI. Well, as it turns out, it was even worse than the plot with the Hutari militia. It turns out that 12, count them, 12 out of the 17 people involved with this so-called kidnap plot were FBI informants. Let me say that again. Out of the 17 people involved with this so-called Gretchen Whitmer kidnap plot, 12 of them were agents of the FBI. So basically, you've got a dozen FBI agents that recruited 5 fucking white supremacist yahoos, got them to talk shit on the internet and in text messages, and then ran in and busted them and said, "Look, we saved Gretchen Whitmer from a kidnapping." It's as old as the fucking hills, people. I don't know why you guys are still surprised at this shit anymore. This is standard practice for the Federal Bureau of Investigation. It was the same way in the early days of the War on Terror after the Patriot Act. They would go and they would recruit these people. You have a dozen informants that recruit 3 true believers and get them to talk some shit, and then bust them in a plot with fake explosives and go, "Look, we saved you again. Oh, you've got to count on us here at the FBI. Oh, we're the only line between you and the bad guys." People still buy it. It's absolutely fucking terrifying. Anyway, I say all that to say this. You have the government working with Facebook to flag posts. You have the government working with Facebook to report people who you think may be in danger of becoming radicalized. And a memo came out last week that just made it about as naked as it fucking gets. And that is the FBI. This is according to the New York Post, but again, you can find the actual memo online. FBI urges monitoring of family members and peers for extremism. The FBI warned Americans over the weekend to keep an eye on friends and family members for signs of mobilization to violence as part of the Biden administration's continued focus on domestic extremism. Well, how convenient that the number one threat of domestic extremism, according to the Biden administration, just happens to be the group of people who are polar opposite of his political alignment. Wow, can't see where that could go wrong. But yeah, the FBI came out and flat out said that you should be spying on your family members. Let me state that again for the record, that you should be spying on your family members. I seem to remember a time during the Cold War where this sort of thing was going on one particular side of one particular wall in one particular European country. And at the time, there was little or no doubt that the Stasi, the secret police, encouraging family members to rat one another out to the powers that be, was universally regarded as a bad thing. But again, we're assuming that the left would understand a principled argument if it bit them in the ass. They don't care about surveillance states. They don't care about intrusions. They don't care about rights being stripped from you so long as their side is in control. And what better way to institute control than, say, emergency powers under the perfect boogeyman? A virus, in fact. Biden grappling with a pandemic of the unvaccinated. There's one headline, and here's some more for you from the Los Angeles Times in an op-ed piece to take it a step further. I'm tired of seeing everyone else put through the ringer because some people do not want to do the right thing because they are the ones who decide what's the right thing and get vaccinated against COVID-19, even though it's been proven way not effective and with a mountain of side effects. Again, people should be allowed to make their own decisions with this thing. But what are we told? We're told that we shouldn't be politicizing it. We shouldn't be politicizing it.
When I think of politicizing a virus, I might have a little bit different perspective. Why? Because I'm a little bit older than most of my listening audience. And I can remember at the start of the 1980s, a certain virus entered the cultural zeitgeist. A certain virus entered the cultural lexicon. A certain virus appeared on the scene. And people didn't know quite what to do with it. People didn't know quite what to do with it because it affected such a limited population. See if this sounds familiar. I'm going to put it more in a context that we can understand with regard to what's going on now with regard to COVID. Once you get past, and in the early days when this Facebook Live thing was pretty much the COVID cast, I have lamented this previously, but I was inspired to revisit it. And I want to give a shout out and a thank you to Sam Wilson and John Wilson. You guys have seen them on my personal page. You have seen them on the Reverend Bart fan page as well. And it was some posts on Sam's page this week that made me want to go back and revisit this. What we know about COVID is that the people that are dying from it are a very, very small subset of the population. They tend to be old. They tend to be immunocompromised. They tend to have at least 3 or more comorbidities. Bottom line, or previous history of respiratory ailments and all these other things. What you have to understand is that ordinary, young, otherwise healthy people are not dying from this. Otherwise healthy, young people without comorbidities are not suffering severe effects. They're not being hospitalized as a general rule. Now, with exceptions, we can pull up anecdotes all day long if that's what makes you happy. But realistically, the people that are dying, the people that are winding up on respirators or ventilators, the people who are suffering the most severe effects and being hospitalized with this, it's a very, very small subset of the population. But we can't do that. We have to make it everybody's problem, don't we? Because that's the only way you sell the narrative. That's the only way that you sell the control. That's the only way that you sell the vaccine. You can't acknowledge the fact that it is a very tiny subset of the population that is effective and address the solution specifically towards that subset. You have to make it everybody's problem and throw everybody into a fucking panic. So again, taking it back to the 1980s when a certain virus entered the cultural lexicon, entered the cultural zeitgeist, the collective consciousness, turned the world on its head. We know the virus that I'm talking about, don't we? And when it was regarded as the quote-unquote gay plague, because that's how people thought of it. Again, I'd lived through the dawn of this epidemic. It was my high school years. My middle school and high school years. I am acutely aware of how it actually progressed, not the revisionist history that we're being given today, but that the only people that had to worry about it were homosexuals, IV drug addicts, and Haitians. But you see, that wouldn't sell. That wouldn't sell. They had to make it everybody's problem. Everybody's problem. Rock Hudson became the poster child when he died. And then there was another young man who got it through a tainted blood transfusion. And suddenly you had to tell everybody that it was their problem. You have to be concerned with it. You have to follow the health protocols. You have to do this. You have to do that, because it's not just these people. It's not just this small specific subset. No. It's everybody's problem. And here we are, decades removed from that. And the overwhelming majority of people who die from AIDS in the developed world remain homosexuals and IV drug addicts. Sorry, but those are the facts. Which is not to justify anything, which is not to deify or demonize anything. It's just a simple statement of fact and ways that the narrative is being controlled. So I want you to take a look at the things that people are pushing with regard to this. Here's an op-ed in the Los Angeles Times, letters to the editor: no vaccine card, no entry. It's time to put restrictions on the unvaccinated. So they're telling you that if you make the conscious choice not to get the vaccine, that you basically need to be ostracized and made into a second-class citizen. They're not even apologizing for it anymore, and they're not making any bones about it. They want you to be unable to work, to earn a living for your family. They want you to be unable to go to a store to acquire goods or food to feed your family. They want you involuntarily subjected not just to lockdowns, but to tests. And eventually they want you involuntarily subjected to a vaccine, which again has not been proven effective. In fact, quite the opposite, and has been proven to have a mountain of side effects that, in spite of their best attempt to minimize, have become enough of an issue that you have people who otherwise might have gone along with it and said, hey, yeah, sure, I'll take that jab. But they're looking at it and they're saying, well, my odds of surviving it, even if I get it, are about 99.7% on average, independent of comorbidities and age. But you want me to take a risk at this vaccine, which is, J&J is giving people pudding blood. Moderna is giving people heart inflammation. The fucking Pfizer is, Pfizer's creating like a whole fucking, the most terrifying side effect right now is the reproductive thing. Where women stop having their periods after receiving the jab, that's affecting the reproductive system, which does kind of play into conspiracy theories that we can't really get into, or I'll get my ass booted off of YouTube. So yeah, we can take a look at all that. But here's what I'm getting at. What they are telling us is that these measures that they're wanting to put in place, these restrictions, these policies that would create a whole second-class citizen status for the unvaccinated, they tell us that it is justified for the sake of public health. They tell us that it is because we are refusing to act in a proper manner. We're refusing to take it seriously, and that we must be quarantined because our behavior cannot be trusted because we cannot do what we're told. I want you to ponder any of those restrictions, even back in the 1980s, at the height of the AIDS panic. I want you to try and imagine, because they were suggested, by the way, not in polite company and not in mainstream media outlets, of which there were like 3 or 4 at the time, and you had to, turn the dial by hand. I'm not going to go down the old guy memory lane there. But it was suggested that people who were HIV positive or had full-blown AIDS should be quarantined, that anyone who was HIV positive needed to be restricted and pulled out of the population because they couldn't be trusted to manage their own affairs, to not have bareback sex. They couldn't be trusted. And again, quite correctly, cooler heads prevailed, because you don't have the right to restrict people like that, no matter what alleged public health crisis you're fucking talking about. If people were to talk, and again, if we're going to have the same standard, right? If we're going to have the same standard, irresponsible behavior, what could be more irresponsible than leaving the bathhouses open, as they did, and they fought to do so at the beginning of the AIDS epidemic, particularly in San Francisco and New York City. They fought to keep the bathhouses open, fought to keep them open. Said that AIDS was a lie and it was a Reagan trick to drive them back into the closet. Wow. If they were to say something like that now, that'd be regarded as a crazy tinfoil hat conspiracy theory, And again, they wouldn't be able to express those opinions on any social media platforms, because the government and circle back bitch would be flagging those posts as misinformation about the virus. What I'm ultimately getting at is this. If your goal is control, and it always is, always, you can sell fear to specific groups of people, or even large swaths of the United States population all at one time. During the 80s, the religious right tried to use fear of a particular virus and a particular demographic that carried the virus that tended to be their political enemies, oddly enough. Funny how that works out. They wanted to use emergency powers to place those people under quarantine, to take away their voice, to take away their freedom. Some of us raged against that, in the same way that those of us who raged against it then are raging against the same type of control being put into place now. Because who tends to be outside the boundaries when it comes to the COVID lockdowns? The majority of people who are opposing the lockdowns, who have opposed the mask mandates from the beginning, are, lo and behold, conservatives, enemies of the current political establishment. And they're not going to take any prisoners. They've made that abundantly clear. It's not just your political ideology that makes you a suspect anymore. It's not just your political beliefs or your reluctance to get on board with COVID lockdowns or mask mandates. It's not about any of that anymore. It's about your refusal to bend the knee to power. And for as much as they project us politicizing the virus, you guys shouldn't make the vaccine a political issue. We're not the ones that did that, my friend. They are the ones that set out from the very beginning to make this thing a political issue because it was never about public health. It remains not about public health. If you doubt that for a second, they're talking about forcing you to have a vaccine passport to travel freely as a United States citizen inside the United States. However, insisting that we have no right to test people who illegally cross the border. We can offer them a vaccine test, but they can refuse. They can refuse. But before too long, you're not going to be able to refuse. This isn't about public health. It never has been. It's always been about control. And anybody with any critical thinking skills can see that now. But if we're talking about politicizing things, the people who politicize it are the ones that have something to gain by that fear. It was the same in the 1980s with the religious right, calling for lockdowns against people infected with HIV and AIDS. And Fauci was in that too. Look up Fauci's history with the AIDS crisis, by the way. I think Sam and John would really appreciate if you did go down that rabbit hole and take a look, because Fauci was in the middle of that one too and was just as much a fraud then as he is now. But that's what it is to politicize a public health crisis. And that's what we're in the midst of right now. But you know what? I promised you that there was some good news. And I'm going to tell you why I feel more optimistic than I have in a long, long time with regard to any of these things, whether it's with the vaccine issue, whether it's with the political control issue, whether it's with the surveillance state being used against domestic right-wing extremism situation, any of these things, I am optimistic. Joey Nunn, the Sultan of Sarcasm, said that I'm probably feeling more optimistic now that I'm back in Spokane and I'm around all of my provisions. Well, I'd be lying if I said that probably didn't have a little something to do with it. But here's why. And again, I'm glad that I can get to this because, as I've said before, and I will continue to say week after week, we don't do black pills around here. We don't do that, oh, woe is me, and our best days are behind us and we're fucking doomed. We don't do that here. I firmly believe that we have gotten over the tipping point. You want to know what happened this weekend? I want you to go to Google right now. And Google, known for fucking with the algorithm to minimize the exposure of certain stories. But guess what? You go to Google right now and you enter worldwide vaccine protests. And the 3 top stories, even though the framing of the stories themselves are trying to downplay and trying to make it look like these protesters are crazy and all these other things, that can't be helped. But the top 3 search results that come up are all from the Herald Sun: global fury over vaccine apartheid. From CBS News: French protesters march against vaccine mandates and passes. From the Independent: thousands of anti-vaccine protesters gather in London. And if you look at the mainstream media coverage here in the United States, you got nothing but crickets. That's okay. That's okay. They can bury it as much as they want, but the internet is forever, bitch. And we're out there communicating with each other, and we are legion. All over the world, people have had enough, and you can only push the perception so far. Had they been smart, had they known what restraint was, they'd have gotten the pushback and they'd have said, okay, we got this far with it. We can't do it. They're going for broke right now. They're going for broke because they know that they have a narrow window. And it's not just COVID. And it's not just outside the United States. Here in the United States, people have had enough. You're seeing pushback from all over the place. Why? Because people can see the lack of logic. You're telling me that the nurses, are frontline heroes through the pandemic all last year, And we're up against it now, so we need them more than ever, which is why you're going to fire them if they refuse to get the vaccine. All of these logical errors are fucking too huge to ignore now. And people are coming off the fence. The fawning faithful will always be the fawning faithful. All of the malfeasance that took place in 2020, all of these audits, it's all coming out. The numbers aren't making sense. And when people fall off the fence, people fall off the fence into sense. They land on our side, Bubba. 10 times out of 10. So while the media may control the narrative, and while it looks bad on a number of fronts, here's some predictions for you. None of these new lockdowns are going to be followed here in the United States. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department has said that they will refuse to enforce Newsom's fucking lockdowns for Los Angeles County. They flat out said they're not going to fucking do it. People have had enough. None of the gun laws that Biden wants to pass are going to make it. He doesn't have the stroke. None of the new lockdowns are going to get any kind of support outside of New York, New Jersey, and fucking California. And even in California, they're pushing back, if you can believe it. And because there is a microscope on all of the swing states, the same way there was on Florida and Ohio, that's another rabbit hole we don't have time to get into right now. Bet your ass that the malfeasance and the irregularities that steered things the way that they did in 2020, they're not going to fly in 2022. The Dems are going to get crushed in the midterms, and in all likelihood, by that point, they're going to 25th Amendment Biden's fucking dementia-addled ass. So the GOP sweeps both houses in the midterms, and Kamala, with Pelosi in the VP seat, has 2 inconsequential years before DeSantis and someone wind up taking the Oval. Things look rough right now. Things look a little scary because they want you fucking scared. But don't give in. Don't fucking give in to the black pill mentality. Don't fucking give in to the thought that they want to push, where they want to make it appear in your own head that we are the tiny little fringe minority. We're not the fringe. We are the majority. We are fucking Legion. And we are coming out swinging. It's our time now. Revel in that. Believe it with all your heart and fucking act on it. I am the Reverend. That is the gospel. We're a couple of minutes over time. I wanted to go a hell of a lot deeper, and I know there are a couple of you guys out there that are just like, dude, go for it, man. Fuck it, we don't have to be anywhere. But I know you do have to be places, and even if you didn't, I do. I'm 2 hours behind you guys because I'm back on the fucking West Coast now. But anyway, man, I wanted to leave you on a good note. I wanted to leave you with some positive information because a lot of this stuff is pretty scary, and it can seem pretty overwhelming. But I believe every bit of what I'm telling you right here, man. We have hit the tipping point. Good people, thinking people have had enough. And swallowing it and being diplomatic isn't working anymore. We're coming out. Guns blazing. Sorry. Pacino rant from Devil's Advocate. Anyway, man, if anything I said helped you guys out, or if, any kind of appreciation, whatever, you can toss me a little bit of coin. I'm on PayPal, I'm on Cash App, I'm on Venmo, I'm on Facebook Pay, I'm on everything. But, not everybody's in a position to do that. And that's totally okay, too, because here's what else you can do for me. You can spread the word. If you dig the program, you dig what I got going on, you can tell whoever might be a like-minded individual, hey, man, there's this crazy fat cripple that rants and raves for an hour every Sunday. I think you'll dig him. Check out the program. The main thing you can do, first and foremost, don't give in to the black pill mentality and follow the directives. We always know, man, the main thing, the core, the iron rule. Say it with me, guys. Say it with me. Be the signal.
In a world full of noise, be the light. In a world full of darkness, and always strive to be that strength in a world full of weakness, man. We're going to roll out of here with some clutch like we always do. Another contribution from Brother Ryan Jenkins. Back in Washington, man, and it feels fucking good. I'm glad you guys made it out. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Do something a little bit every, like my man Shondo Blades is always saying, 1% better every day. Maybe you only do 10 push-ups today. Maybe you do 15 tomorrow. Maybe you get a little more sleep tonight than you did the night before. Something. Make yourself a little bit stronger, a little bit straighter, a little bit harder to kill. Keep the mind and the heart sharp. I love you guys. See you next Sunday. Thanks for coming out. Peace.